Greetings, comrades. This is Living Caleb, and it is time. This is my 1000th upload on YouTube, and this is a special that I've been planning for quite a while now. And this took me a few weeks to, get all the clips together, get all the recordings done, all that stuff. But this is a video I've been planning to do for a long time, and it is my history of gaming. Basically, everything I've played from the NES to the PC and everything in between. How I transitioned from consoles to PC to both. What games I've played in the past. A lot of stuff that went on in my life. Getting a job. Losing my parents and stuff like that. And throughout the entire journey, video games helped me get through it all. So yeah, this took a long time to make, and I would really appreciate a like to show your support in this channel, and yeah, to help me celebrate 1,000 uploads on YouTube. I promised this special when I hit one of two milestones, either 1,000 video uploads or 10 years of being on YouTube. And I managed to hit my 1,000th video here before October of 2026, which would have marked my 10-year anniversary, but since we had 1,000 uploads, this video is up. So yeah, this is a long video, so get some snacks, maybe a few drinks, and enjoy the video. And if you watch to the very end, I have a very special message for you all. Okay, before we actually start this video, I'd like to mention, this will be the only video where I'm going to allow comments. I'm going to give this a little grace period, and the response is generally positive. People, congratulating me for the uploads, or just being, good people in general. I might consider re-enabling comments on all my videos. Of course, it gets really toxic to the point I have to block a lot of people, then comments are going to go dark again, and they're probably going to remain dark for the foreseeable future. So yeah, this is for all the people who actually support me and, actually watch my videos and are just good people in general. So all you console fanboys and PC elitists, don't even bother posting your comments on here. You're just going to end up getting blocked. So just keep your opinions to yourself. I'm already on to you. So yeah, don't ruin this for the people that actually support me and actually, help me get to this point. So anyway, enjoy the video. I guess we should start natural with my first ever exposure to games, the NES, or at least what I remember of it. Now, according to my sisters, the family did have an Atari 2600 back in the day, but they didn't have that much memory actually playing it. Most of their memories came from the NES, which was the same with me. I was only like 2 years old in San Antonio when I first saw my two sisters playing the NES. Now, I don't remember too much of what games we actually had back then. Honestly, I don't even remember the first game I ever played. I do vaguely remember them playing Super Mario Bros. There were also a few other games I have vague memories of, like Dr. Mario, Castle Quest, and there was this one game with this weird frog character where you go up a spiral tower. I later learned it was Castellian, also known as Nebulous. I also remember a few of the accessories, such as the NES Zapper, when they played Duck Hunt, shooting the ducks with a little light gun. That was pretty cool. I also remember the trackpad. The trackpad? You mean the power pad, you idiot? That pad that you put on the floor and rapidly stomp on to get your character to run and track meet and other games of that nature. I know there were so many legendary games I missed out on, like Contra, Mega Man, Castlevania, games I wouldn't play until much later in life. There were probably a few other games we had and played back then, but I otherwise don't have that good of a memory of the NES days, even when we moved to where we live now. Granted, I'm discovering new NES games nowadays with multi-cards, and of course finding them on eBay and stuff, but back then, when I was just a little kid, I don't have that many memories of what games we actually played. Of course, Super Mario Bros. Is a big one, but other than that, my memories of the NES are pretty foggy. Again, I was but a toddler at the time. The next generation, though, was different. Now, I didn't have much memory of the NES, but I did have more memory with its successor, the Super NES. I was just starting kindergarten when we had a Super Nintendo. My dad was stationed at Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War, but before that, we got the SNES and had some fun times with it. Unlike the NES, I actually remember what games we had back in the day. Well, most of them. We had Firepower 2000, still one of my favorite shooters in the SNES, Strike Gunner STG, Desert Strike, and of course we had Super Mario World, as well as Super Mario All-Stars. Though I don't remember if it was a 2-in-1 cart or if they were separate carts. I know we had both, and I played both, and I loved both. One day I'll go on eBay and get those games again. This is all the time I learned about video game rentals. Remember those? There was a Hastings down the street where I lived, and I remember we rented a lot of games over the years for the SNES. Shooters like Axlay and Gradius 3, platformers like Mega Man X, games based on cartoons I watched back in the day like Rocko's Modern Life and Ren and Stimpy, and games that looked interesting like PTO, Pacific Theater of Operations, which I had no idea how to play. It was technically my first taste of strategy games, even though I had no idea what I was doing. There were some other games I remember playing back then: Clay Fighter, Uniracers, Super Mario Kart, Urban Strike, even the infamous SNES version of Mortal Kombat. At the time, I didn't know it was supposed to have blood. Then I played Mortal Kombat 2. I was like 6 or 7 years old at the time, and I was blown away. I also remember playing Street Fighter 2 and its 37 different versions. There are tons of other games I played that'll take a while to list, but I played at the SNES quite a bit. But probably my biggest memory that I have with the Super NES and what changed my video game forever: Doom. Yes, my first exposure of Doom was the SNES version. I know, and I've said it many times before, it's not the best version of Doom to play, but you have to start somewhere. It's thanks to SNES Doom that I fell in love with Doom. Despite its technical limitations and piss-awful gameplay, I still love the game. I beat it a few times and I enjoyed it, especially with my dad. I would later get Doom 64, which we'll talk about soon. Then I played the classic Doom games with the Doom 3 Special Edition on Xbox. Again, we'll get to that later. But it just snowballed to the love of Doom I have now. It's still my favorite gaming series of all time. Anyway, back on track. When it came to the SNES, it was definitely a huge leap from the NES. The graphics were better, the sound was better, the games were more fleshed out. I played a lot of games during the 4th generation of consoles. But the 5th generation was where I really locked into gaming. Not too long after we had the SNES, we got ourselves a Nintendo 64. Yes, back in the day, I was pro Nintendo. I was in the 4th grade when we got the N64. We did have a few games for it back then. Turok Dinosaur Hunter was one of them. I remember putting in the cheat codes and blowing up bad guys with rockets and energy cannons. What I was blown away from the most was the graphics. Full 3D models, better textures, and fluid motion. Well, at the time anyway. This was 1996 to 97. It was a huge leap from the Super Nintendo, that's for sure. The big game I remember playing a lot of: Doom 64. Yes, it was still 2D, but it was Doom. My father and I played it a lot. We used to have a generic strategy guide where we would find the secrets hidden in the levels and get more ammo and better weapons. It looked a lot different from the original Doom, from the atmosphere to the sound effects to the monster designs. It's an underrated entry in Doom, in my opinion. I'm glad it has a new lease on life thanks to its re-release today. Of course, that wasn't the only FPS game I played on the N64. There was GoldenEye 007. What else do I need to say about GoldenEye? It's a legend. One of the best FPS games on the N64, if not of all time. So much fun trying out the different guns, playing around with the cheats, and the multiplayer. Oh my god, the multiplayer. 4-player split screen. Before Call of Duty and Halo, we had 4-player split screen matches on Facility and Complex. I remember playing as Odd Job, his unfair height advantage. And, All the weird weapons like the Moonraker laser pistol, the golden gun. Man, fun times. Still need to get this game on the Xbox, or at least hunt down an original N64 copy. I actually forgot it had a re-release. But if I rented a lot of games on the SNES, I rented a lot more on the N64. Blast Corps, Mortal Kombat Trilogy, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, Jet Force Gemini. The list goes on. A lot of gems on the N64, as well as some lesser known titles like Silicon Valley and Body Harvest. One of my favorites from the N64 is Star Fox 64. I remember getting I remember getting a VHS tape in the mail, which was basically an advertisement for Nintendo Power that promoted Star Fox 64 and its included Rumble Pack. If I recall, the Nintendo 64 was the first console that introduced Rumble controllers. I could be wrong, but, I was a kid back then. Granted, it was a Rumble Pack that you insert into the controller itself, but someone had to be the first, I guess. Probably the one game I played the most on the N64, StarCraft 64. This is around the time I was getting more into strategy games, where you had to think before you acted, build up your base, build up your army, and one wrong strategy could cost you the mission. I loved the diverse races and their unique upgrades and abilities. The setting was cool, the action was intense at times, all with a lot of slowdown. Yeah, they managed to squeeze an RTS from the PC on the N64. While not perfect, it was still a fun game, and I still have a lot of fond memories of it. And I still have it. And who could forget Perfect Dark? It was even better than GoldenEye, and there was a ton more content compared to GoldenEye. With its futuristic setting, Joanna Dark as a protagonist, fighting off aliens near the end, a lot of espionage and gunplay. It was GoldenEye on steroids, in my opinion. I played even more games on the N64 than I did on the SNES, hence why I have better gaming memories back then. A lot of my elementary school years were just filled with fun games on the N64, but it wasn't the only console we got back in the day. During that time, we got ourselves a PlayStation. The original PlayStation, one of the first disc-based consoles. At least one of the first ones that went mainstream. One of my sisters wanted a PlayStation for one particular game. You might have heard of it. Resident Evil. My mom loved horror games, and even my dad was getting into it, especially later in life. It was pretty intense for the time. The tank-like controls, the danger of zombies and monsters, the limited ammo, the fixed camera angles. It's changed a lot over the decades, but the original still holds a special place in our hearts. And then there's Resident Evil 2. We were even more hooked. The two different protagonists, all the different weapons you can unlock, the somewhat scarier setting. We rented a lot of games on the PS1 as well. Military games like Black Dawn and Spec Ops, fighting games like Tekken 3, strategy games like Command and Conquer, space shooters like Colony Wars, other horror games like Parasite Eve, and even the original GTA, the very first Grand Theft Auto. And naturally, with another console comes another version of Doom. This one, however, is based on the original game instead of Doom 64's new interpretation. The PS1 version of Doom is still my favorite console version of Doom, and considered by many one of the best console versions of Doom, period. It had the original gameplay with different lighting and creepier music, and even levels from Doom 2, and some original levels, which I thought was really cool. Now, despite the PS1 and its awesome library of games, I still played the N64 a bit more, even though the DualShock 1 controller was somewhat superior with its dual triggers as well as dual joysticks. The N64 still holds a more special place in my heart than the PS1. And at the time I thought to myself, can video games get any better than this? Well, I was about to find out. Let's go to the wonderful year of 2000. Yes, we could talk about Y2K and the turn of millennium, but let's be real. 2000s would bring us a new era of gaming. 3D mostly. Bigger and disc-based. This is when cartridges were being put on the wayside. At least for a little while. Well, actually, before we go to 2000. Let's go back a year further to 1999. Before we talk about the big three, we need to talk about a rather obscure console. You may have heard of it, the Sega Dreamcast. Who could forget the launch date, September 9, 1999? I was just starting 6th grade by the time this console came out. It was the one and only Sega console we ever owned. Yeah, we never had a Genesis. Like I said, we rented one, but we never owned one. We never had a Sega Saturn, and I don't think we ever had a Sega Master System. So, yeah, the Dreamcast was the only Sega console we ever owned. Playing for the first time, the graphics were a huge improvement at the time compared to the PS1 and, of course, the N64. Sonic Adventure, House of the Dead 2, Resident Evil Code Veronica. Pretty much any console that had Resident Evil, my sister wanted to get. And we got it. And we enjoyed it. Sad that there's no Doom game on the Dreamcast, but that's not to say it didn't have awesome FPS games. Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament. It would have gotten Half-Life, but it got cancelled. Now, I didn't play that many games on the Dreamcast, but what I did play was pretty awesome. The one game I remember playing the most was Shenmue. Exploring the world as Ryo, talking to people, buying stuff from vending machines, getting money, all while trying to go after your father's killer. I still haven't played 2 and 3 yet, but that'll change one day. Now, as far as the controller goes, I was a little mixed on it, but it was an interesting controller for the time. You can install a VMU in the controller, which is basically a memory card that doubles as a portable gaming device, and the screen would do different things depending on what supported game you were playing, like showing your health, show off special effects. It was a gimmick, but it was a fun gimmick. It didn't have shoulder buttons, which was bizarre. It just had triggers. And that design would later bleed over to the OG Xbox. Now, I didn't have as many fond memories of the Dreamcast as I probably should have. Sonic Adventure was fun, Shenmue was innovative for the time, and Quake 3 Arena and Unreal Tournament were mindless fragging fun. And we did run a few games for it, but none that really come on the top of my head. And it's a shame this was Sega's last console, and the only Sega console I ever played. Like I said, I never had a Genesis, never had a Sega Master System, never had a Saturn. But at the dawn of the 21st century, there would be a new generation of consoles, and a new generation of gaming. Okay, now let's go to the wonderful year of 2000. A time of PlayStation 2, flip phones, nu metal, and DVDs. I was starting my junior high years, and around that time, my family decided to buy a PlayStation 2. It was the console to get at the time. It had improved graphical and processing power compared to the PS1. It had a sleek, attractive design that doesn't feel out of place today. And it could play DVD movies. This is a time where DVDs were really big and VHS was being put on the wayside. But of course, we bought it for the games. The ones I remember, Kessen, Time Splitters, Smuggler's Run, Fantavision. I have a lot of fond memories of playing the PS2. And there were a lot of great games on there. The Ratchet and Clank games were awesome. Contra Shattered Soldier and Neo Contra were challenging but fun. Time Splitters 2 is still one of my favorite games of all time. The Armored Core games were cool. There were even some budget games that were fun, like Seek and Destroy. And of course, we could play PS1 games on it, because it was fully backwards compatible with the PS1 library. Now, I did miss on some notable classics like God of War and the Final Fantasy games. But what I did play was still amazing. There was one game I always wanted to play called God Hand, but good luck finding a copy right now for a good price. That game is stupid expensive. But anyway, the PS2 is awesome, but that wasn't the only console we got. A year or two later, when I was in 8th grade, we got ourselves a Nintendo GameCube. The original purple one. And I thought it was interesting at the time, the fact that it had a handle on it, the fact that it had 4 control ports, much like the Nintendo 64, and then it played smaller DVD-style discs. They were small, and they didn't hold that much data. So naturally, games look worse on that than it did in the PS2 and Xbox. Yeah, I didn't play as many games on the GameCube as I did in the PS2 or indeed the Xbox, but there were some awesome games for it as well. Super Smash Bros. Melee was awesome. Metroid Prime was a change of pace from the original games. My nephews loved Super Mario Sunshine. I remember playing games like Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance on the GameCube. But one game actually caught the attention of my sister and even my parents. Resident Evil 4. My dad used to play that game a lot, unlocking all the hidden weapons, finding all the monsters, looking for all the secrets, playing the mercenaries mode. Yeah, the house was hooked on the game, but I'm kind of part of the minority here. I couldn't really get into the game. And I enjoyed the first three Resident Evils because they were creepy, the zombies, the monsters. And Resident Evil 4 to me felt a little over the top. Not that it's a bad game, it's just not quite Resident Evil to me. Again, I grew up with the first three Resident Evils. But to each their own. One game I did play a lot in the GameCube, though, was Animal Crossing. I played it a lot. It really was like living a second life in that game. Talking to your neighbors, collecting furniture for your house, exploring your town with real-time seasons and weather, even playing full NES games. And it even included a memory card, because the fun thing about Animal Crossing is that every town's randomly generated, from the layout to the neighbors you have, to even the fruit that comes from the trees. So no two towns are alike, which is pretty innovative for the time. I was obsessed with Animal Crossing, and that game alone made me glad we had a GameCube. One console I did play a lot, though, even through my high school years, was the Microsoft Xbox. At the time, I was like, Microsoft made a console? Yeah, the same Microsoft responsible for Windows XP made a console, the Xbox. It's practically risen from the Dreamcast's grave, but I had no idea how much fun I was going to have, how much time I was going to spend with that console. There are so many good games, a lot of multi-platforms, but there were some exclusive games too. Mech Assault, Project Gotham Racing, and a little game called Halo Combat Evolved. This game, the graphics, the gameplay, the setting, the multiplayer, this game not only turned me into a Halo fan, but an Xbox fan. As the years passed, the games only got better. Mortal Kombat, Jade Empire, Halo 2, Doom 3. Yep, there needed to be a Doom game for the 6th generation. PlayStation 2 didn't get one, GameCube didn't get one, Xbox did. Yes, I know Doom 3 is considered the black sheep of the Doom series. It's not a bad game at all, far from it. It's actually a great game. It's just far removed from the arcadey action we expected from Doom. It was more slow-paced and horror-focused. That said, my dad and I did enjoy the game. Heck, I even played through the entire game on this channel. And of course, I got the Doom 3 Collector's Edition, which included Doom 1 and 2. And that was my true exposure to the classic Doom games. Yes, the Super NES version of Doom, there was that. But I played these ports, it's like, wow, this is how it was back in the day. And it wouldn't be till later on where I finally would play it on the PC. But for now, and this time, the Xbox version was where it's at for me. And I just mentioned Halo 2. Halo 2 was even better than Halo 1. I got the Steelbook Collector's Edition. I still have it, actually. That's how much I loved Halo at the time. They took everything the original Halo had and made it better. Another game I played a lot on the Xbox was The Punisher. This game helped me get through high school. This is around the time of the Thomas Jane movie, which I also liked. Wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but I liked it. And that game was loosely based on the movie. It was so cool, having different guns at your disposal, fighting off gangsters and Russian mercs, the different environmental kills, even interrogating enemies to get information and accessing hidden areas. I remember putting in the cheats and just going full Rambo on everyone in each level. There were so many other games that I played that if I were to talk about them, we'd be here all day. But The Punisher, I definitely stuck a lot of time into that game. Even when the 360 came out, we'll talk about that shortly, I was still enjoying the OG Xbox well into 2006. And I also like to point out, I did have a few handhelds around this time. Around the same time we got the Xbox, one of my sisters gave me her whole Game Boy Advance, which I didn't end up getting too many games for, though I thought Sigma Star Saga was such an underrated gem. I'm glad it got a re-release recently. And the WarioWare games were awesome. I also got a Nintendo DS for Christmas around 2005. Again, didn't get too many games for it, but what I did play was awesome. Meteos, WarioWare, the Bleach games. but I pretty much stuck with the Xbox for the most part, but I still played the PS2 and GameCube here and there. But the Xbox was pretty much my main console, even during the waning months of 2006. I graduated from high school and got a job as a casual at a post office downtown. Unfortunately, that didn't last long. I got laid off after 4 months, but it was no fault of my own. I wouldn't get another job till much later because my sister had recently got married at the time and was in between new living conditions and jobs. So I was doing a lot of babysitting for her two sons and daughter, all while also caring for my mother who had lupus, diabetes, and other health problems. But at least during that time, we got one console that would quickly become possibly my favorite console of all time. This is probably going to be the longest segment in this video, so brace yourselves. So it was 2007. My mom and dad took me and my nephew to an Air Force base in New Mexico. Cannon Air Force Base, I believe it was. My dad was a retired Air Force and bought a lot of things to the base exchange. We went there and explored the commissary, which also had video games. Saw a few OG Xbox games there. But the reason we went there was to get the Xbox 360. The original gray model. Keep in mind, this is 2007. This is before we knew about the infamous Red Ring of Death. We were all excited to get it. And when we got home, we started setting it up and went to Best Buy to get my first Xbox 360 game. And no, it wasn't Gears of War. It was actually Fear, which originally came on the PC back in 2005. I was excited to try this game out because it interested me even before I got the 360. Looking back, even in 2007 on a flat screen CRT, I was impressed by the graphics and gameplay. I especially loved how the controller felt in my hands. It was a big step up from the OG Xbox controller. The OG controller was bulky. The black and white buttons didn't make much sense to me. It should have had shoulder buttons, but the Xbox 360 controller fixed that. It had proper shoulder buttons instead of just triggers, and it did away with the white and black buttons. Microsoft wanted to be different back then, I suppose, but I guess they came to their senses in the 7th generation. But back to Fear. I loved the creepy atmosphere, how the guns felt, how smart the AI was. And then just a few days later, I got Gears of War. And wow, was I really blown away. Now, looking at it now, it's not too visually impressive compared to games now, but back then, it was incredible. Between the OG Xbox and the Xbox 360, it was night and day. It wasn't the most colorful game out there, being mostly gray and brown and a little bit of red from the blood. But at the time, I was blown away by how amazing the game looked and how the gameplay felt, how the guns felt, the cover system. This is all before HDMI was widespread. Yeah, the original gray models didn't have HDMI. That wouldn't come till later. But yeah, I love the setting, the characters, the guns. Gears of War is an awesome game. It will only get better with the sequels. At least the Xbox 360 sequels. Haven't played the newer ones yet, but maybe later. But that's just a tip of the iceberg. There were so many other games I could think of that I had a lot of fond memories with. Dead Rising, where you explore a zombie-infested mall, wear different costumes, and use different items to kill zombies. Lost Planet, one of the best-looking games at the time, where you explore a frozen planet and fight off pirates and giant insect aliens to collect T-Eng to keep yourself alive. Condemned Criminal Origins, one of the more unique FPS experiences I've played, where you examine crime scenes and fight off enemies with melee weapons. Guns were few and far between, and you couldn't get any more ammo for them. What you saw was what you got. BioShock, where you explore Rapture and fight off splicers with guns and special powers to survive. Halo 3. Yeah, Halo 3. Need I say more? Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, my first ever taste of the Call of Duty universe. The 7th generation of consoles is definitely the golden age of COD. Far Cry 3, probably my favorite entry in the series thanks to Voss. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Buggy as it was, I love the game and its DLC. Naturally, the PC version would be better, but even the 360 version was decent. My nephews and niece were also playing on it. Now, as I mentioned before, I was babysitting my sister's kids while she was in between jobs. They spent a lot of time at our house. And during that span, we played all sorts of games on it. Wrestling games, first-person shooters, platformers. Too many for you to remember on the top of my head. We went to GameStop a lot and bought a bunch of used games. Some good, some not so good. We bought some games, we traded in games, we bought more games. It's a shame GameStop hasn't been the same since then. It's been a shadow of its former self these days. But I digress. At this time, I played a lot of FPS games. The 360 controller is practically designed for FPS games thanks to the shape of the triggers. I already mentioned a few of the games, but I was really into Halo and Call of Duty. Now, I remember playing Halo 3 ODST. Interestingly, you're not playing as Master Chief that time around. And there's Halo Wars, an RTS game based in the Halo universe, which is actually pretty fun, and works surprisingly well for a console RTS game. And of course, Halo Reach. I remember being excited for this game, being able to play your own Spartan in the campaign before the events of Halo 1. And it's not just Halo I played a lot of. There's also Borderlands. Awesome looter shooter. Even to this day, it's still fun. Both 1 and 2 were awesome. Didn't really play the pre-sequel until much later. 3 was okay. Haven't played 4 yet as of this video. But I heard it's better than 3. That's all I know about that. But yeah, played a lot of Borderlands, It's basically Diablo with guns. You fight groups of enemies, they drop loot, like more money, different guns. You can find, guns with different abilities, like corrosive bullets and stuff like that. Guns that fire really fast, guns that shoot slow but do a lot of damage. You never know what you were gonna get during that. And Borderlands 2 I played even more. And the DLC was awesome. And all the crazier guns in that game, I don't think much more needs to be said about it. If you ask me, Borderlands 2 is where the series peaked, but it's been kind of hit or miss since then. But that's just my opinion. And of course, I played pretty much every Call of Duty game on the 360 at the time. Call of Duty 2, which is a launch title. One of the best World War II shooters, in my opinion. And of course, there's World at War, but yeah, there's that. The Modern Warfare trilogy, which many argue is better than the reboot trilogy, which I kind of agree with, honestly. And, of course, there's Black Ops 2. Probably the COD game I spent the most time on. Modern Warfare 3. I got all the way to Prestige Master, got 10 gold guns, and I have a KD ratio that I can't match in any other COD game. Ghosts was what temporarily killed the series for me, and it wouldn't be until Modern Warfare 2019 that I got back into it. One series I really enjoyed was the Forza Motorsport series. This is the series that kind of got me into racing games. Like, a lot more than Project Gotham Racing. Forza Motorsport 2 was the first Forza game I've ever played. I sunk so many hours in that game. And it was worth it just to drive around my dream car, a Celine S7. I'm going to use a pun here, it drove me to get the original Forza Motorsport on the OG Xbox. Forza is pretty much Xbox's Gran Turismo. Forza 3 and 4 were even better. The newer series entries were pretty good, though it kind of tanked with Forza Motorsport 2023. And it hasn't recovered since. Now it's just the Forza Horizon games these days. I've talked a lot about the games, but you probably noticed that I haven't talked much about the Red Ring of Death. Well, because it happened to everybody. Or at least 50% of 360 owners. We had the original gray models I mentioned, and throughout its life, we had to get it repaired like 3 or 4 times because of that Red Ring of Death. Because if you watched YouTubers back then, the 360, at least the original model, was hastily built, and it was pretty much built like crap. Thankfully, later models revised a lot of those issues. But yeah, the slim model was probably the one to get, but we didn't get that till later. We stuck with the original gray model. We played that a lot, but that all changed around 2012. That was when the console would suddenly stop reading discs. Even after cleaning it with an air duster can, the laser just stopped working. And it was out of warranty at the time, so we ended up getting the newer slim model. which blew the original model out of the water. Now, actually, before we continue with the Xbox, there's something I forgot to mention. This actually slipped my mind while talking about this. So, we did have a Wii. Shortly after we bought the 360, we got a Wii. I forgot where we bought it. I think it was Best Buy. But honestly, I didn't play that many games on the Wii. Yeah, it was an innovative console. You know, the Wii remote, the motion controls that didn't work sometimes. But it was an interesting console, but I didn't play that many games for it. You know, Wii Sports was fun. I played quite a bit of Mario Kart Wii with that steering wheel controller, and my nephew liked Metroid Prime 3, and it was backwards compatible with GameCube games. But I just didn't have much interest in the Wii. The motion controls just weren't enough for me. I pretty much just stuck with the 360. But anyway, back to the 360. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but I didn't have any internet access on the original 360. Yes, I know it can't. There was a separate Wi-Fi adapter you could buy for it, but even if I had gotten one, we didn't have Wi-Fi in the house at the time. But at some point, we did upgrade our internet so now we do have Wi-Fi. But that was until we still had the gray model, and yeah, I didn't have access to the internet at the time. But once we got the slim model, it was a breath of fresh air because they had built-in Wi-Fi. I could, actually download updates for games, download full games, and of course, update the console. Now, funny thing, we did update the original 360 through USB. Yes, this was a time where you could actually download updates through a USB thumb drive and update the console that way. So it was a good way for people who didn't have Xbox Live or, access to the internet in that side of the house or whatever to update their consoles. Just download the USB drive and put in the update. That's how it was up until we got the Slim. Yeah, with the Slim, I could just do it all through Wi-Fi, so it's much easier to keep the console up to date, even though my bedroom was on the other side of the house and the Wi-Fi was, to put it politely, kind of shit. And since it was a Slim model, all the issues the original models had were gone. The time we did have it, it never red ringed on us. It had better ventilation, so it cooled better. And a big thing, it had HDMI. Yeah, some of the later 360 models would have HDMI, but the one we had did not. It didn't even come with a cable. In fact, I remember even the Slim model didn't come with a cable, but it did have an HDMI port. Before this, we pretty much solely had composite. We also had a component cable too, but none of our TVs utilized that. But we did eventually make the switch to the flat screen HDMI capable TVs you see nowadays. Granted, the ones we had were a bit smaller back then, but hey, had to start somewhere. Believe it or not, this will be my first ever taste of online gaming. Finally getting to try out Xbox Live was quite the experience for me. This is also around the time Black Ops 2 was about to come out, but I got my first online matches on Halo Reach, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 1, all the heavy hitters online at the time. And then I played my first match of Black Ops 2 online. The rest is history. Not only that, but I could also experience Xbox Live Arcade. All those awesome arcade games and indie titles. Contra, State of Decay, Battle Block Theater, Geometry Wars, Worms, Doom 1 and 2. I could go on. I will admit I was skeptical about paying for an online service at the time, but when I tried it out with a 3-month subscription, I could see what all the fuss was about. Definitely made a few friends on Xbox Live during that time I was on it. Even my brother-in-law, who was into World of Tanks at the time, was on Xbox Live. But of course, with any online community, there are toxic individuals. Unfortunate, I know. I was fully aware of how bad the community could be, especially in COD lobbies. I'm looking at you, Modern Warfare 2. Trolling and toxicity is just something you have to deal with online, whether you like it or not. Where there are good people, there are bad people. That can be said for any community, really. But in the Xbox, it was especially bad. That being said, I really enjoyed the 360 for the time I had it. But I was curious about what the next Xbox is going to be all about. And we were all excited about the next Xbox. Then the Xbox One was announced around 2013. There was no more excitement. If you weren't aware, the Xbox One announcement drew a lot of ire from the Xbox community. the DRM that could break your console if you didn't check in constantly, the used game policies, and always online requirements. And then there were people like Adam Orth and Don No Internet Get a 360 Matrick, just making things worse for Xbox. Many Xbox gamers, including myself, lost interest in the Xbox One very quickly. Yes, I know they reversed a lot of those controversial features later on, but at that point, the damage was already done. So I had elected to stay with the Xbox 360 for just a little longer. But fate had other ideas. Now, I'm going to confess this to each and every one of you watching this video. I would not have considered PC gaming in 2012. I may have been on the cusp of PC gaming in 2013. 2014 changed everything. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I had lost interest in the Xbox One, and I wasn't really interested in the PlayStation 4, being Team Xbox for so long. So I chose to stick with the 360 for just a little longer. I still played a handful of games like Saints Row 4, World of Tanks, and Titanfall. Fun thing, Titanfall was actually the last Xbox 360 game I ever purchased at the time. It was fun, Call of Duty, but with mechs. Definitely sunk some time into that game. I even played a little bit of the Destiny 1 beta at the time. And I still enjoyed World of Tanks, but the community was so toxic, and the Xbox Live community was getting substantially worse, possibly thanks to the Xbox One debacle. A few individuals who just wanted to talk shit while I was getting used to my new tank destroyer that I just got was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back. At that point, I was fed up with Xbox Live, and I was fed up with Xbox and their fuck-ups. So I thought, that's it. I'm done with consoles. I'm switching to PC. So, my time on Xbox had decreased substantially, and I started setting money aside for a gaming PC. Wanted to move away from the toxic Xbox community and make way for the Steam community. Little did I know the Steam community would actually be worse. We'll get into that later. Since I was laid off from my old job in late 2006, my mother began me a $20 weekly allowance for helping out around the house, taking care of her, and babysitting for my sister. I know it's not much, but that's how it was for at least 9 years. Things were tough for me, but she helped me out while I helped her and my sister out. She even offered to buy certain games for me, especially during the 360 days. Anyway, I had set a little money aside for my first gaming PC. I watched several videos on YouTube about switching to PC and the benefits of gaming on PC. Like performance, being able to mod your games, the customization. Probably the most memorable video I've seen was the infamous Kill Your Console video from Tech Syndicate. And it had a lot of valid points at the time. Maybe not so much now, but remember, this was back in 2014. During that time, I set up a Steam account, since it's the biggest PC gaming platform at the time. This is before the Epic Games Store. Let's not get into that. But yeah, I managed to get the original Doom 1 and 2, as well as a few indie games like Gigantic Army, Jets and Guns Gold, and Crimson Clover. Wasn't much, but you gotta start with something. I would eventually get around to playing Skyrim with mods, but not until a little later. Now, before this, I was actually playing on an old Dell Dimension desktop. I forgot the actual model of it, but I was playing a few games on it, and even the 2D games ran like absolute crap. Because it wasn't a dedicated gaming PC. The CPU was barely an APU. It could run Morrowind, surprisingly, but trying to play Doom on a source port like a Z-Doom, it just ran like crap. So that's when I knew I had to get a proper gaming PC. But yeah, once I saved up enough money, I pulled the trigger and ordered my first ever gaming PC. It was a Cybertron PC. I'll show a picture of it right here. Fun fact, this was the first thing I ever purchased on Amazon. It was a pre-built PC. This is before I got the knowledge of building PCs I have now. It was around $500, so you get what you pay for. It was Windows 8.1. That alone should tell you how old this was. It had an AMD APU, no dedicated graphics card whatsoever. Once I unpacked it and set it up, I was ready to see what PC gaming was all about, especially for someone who only occasionally played StarCraft and Command and Conquer on an old Windows XP machine. You gotta remember, I was pretty much mainly a console gamer up until this point. So I tried out a few smaller games, of course. Like the classic Doom games, they ran great on the new PC. You would hope so, because it has a better APU compared to that Dimension desktop I had. Yeah, Crimson Clover has become my favorite bullet hell shooter. Morrowind ran surprisingly well in the APU. That APU especially. Though Oblivion, not so much. But I wanted to play more, so I ended up saving a little more money to get a better power supply from a PC. It came with a 500 watt power supply, if I remember correctly, and I upgraded to a 750 watt. So I have some more headroom for a graphics card. Then around late December 2014, I got my first ever graphics card, an EVGA GeForce GTX 750 Ti. It was $150, and installation was a breeze, especially since it didn't require a 6-pin connector like other GPUs. It pretty much ran straight from the motherboard. With that, I was ready to really game. Borderlands 2, Saints Row 4, Red Faction Guerrilla, all these games I played on the 360, running better and looking better. Then I played Oblivion and Skyrim with mods. Wow. The amount of replayability in those games with mods was through the roof. Thank you, Nexus Mods. It was also around this time that I got a new job at my local grocery store, and I'm still working there to this day. I had a more steady income at that point, while still setting aside a little money for PC parts. I was also, saving up for, the future. Yeah, around that time I upgraded my CPU to an AMD Athlon X4 760K. It was a cheap quad-core processor to give my PC a little more oomph. Again, this is 2015, so this is what I could afford at the time, and pretty much what I was comfortable with at the time. Yeah, at that point, I could play all the games I played in the 360, those that were on Steam anyway, and then some. I already mentioned, Borderlands 2, Saints Row 4 and all that, but there were so many other games I played. Lots of indie games I missed out on, like Skullgirls and Fez, favorites like Battle Block Theater and Far Cry 3, and some new indie games I've never heard of. Too many to list here, actually. But there was one game that definitely took a lot of my game time. Garry's Mod. Now, I played a lot of Half-Life 2 on the 360, and even the OG Xbox. Yes, for those that didn't know, Half-Life 2 came out on the original Xbox. Naturally, I got the Half-Life series on Steam, really cheap. Then I got Garry's Mod. Little did I know what that $10 was going to give me. A huge sandbox game with a thriving modding community. Hundreds of maps, thousands of props and ragdolls, and limitless creativity led to me having a little stint in screenshot making. I made tons of goofy and some serious screenshots back in the day, and I still have most of them on my OneDrive. Part of me wants to go back to making screenshots in Gmod, but I've long moved past that phase. Yeah, I have made hundreds of screenshots of characters from my favorite games and franchises. I even made my own Combine Gmod persona. But that wasn't the only game I sunk a lot of time into. I already mentioned Skyrim and its modding community, and then I got Fallout 4 and dove into its modding community. I will admit, the modding communities alone were a big driving factor in my leap from consoles to PC. But the performance, the graphics, the flexibility of the PC, there's a completely different ecosystem from consoles. Adding so many cool things that simply weren't possible on the consoles. About a year or two into my PC venture, I got my hands on my first mechanical keyboard, a Logitech G710 with Cherry MX Blue switches. I still have that keyboard, as a matter of fact. I keep it for sentimental value because it was my first ever mechanical gaming keyboard, and I've gotten so many others since then, from Logitech, Corsair, SteelSeries. Nowadays I use Royal Kludge. Yeah, my 750 Ti rig was running pretty good until Doom 2016 came out. I remember buying it day one, and I tried to play it, but it never made it to the title screen. So yeah, the 750 Ti, as capable as it was for the price, couldn't run Doom 2016. So I saved up for a more powerful card that was still within my budget, and it was another EVGA card, a GeForce GTX 960 SC. This one did require power from the PSU, but it was no big deal. Once I put in the new graphics card, which all this was still in the Cybertron PC, by the way, I was playing Doom 2016 and was blown away. it was a fun arcadey fragfest that Doom 3 should have been. It was an awesome reboot for my favorite game franchise. Of course, this was just but a fraction of the games I played around the time, and with more games, I needed better hardware. So it was around 2017 that I started setting some money aside for some new PC parts to build my own PC. Cybertron PC had fared well, but it was time for an upgrade. I ended up selling my 360 Slim and used that money, which wasn't much, towards parts for a new PC. I started planning out my first PC build. For the CPU, I went with an Intel i5-6600K, which was a really popular CPU at the time, quad-core processor with a 3.5 GHz clock speed and 8 MB of cache. It was my workhorse CPU for a while. I also went with a Z170A motherboard from Asus and 32 GB of DDR4 RAM from Corsair. And the GPU I went with was the, at the time, venerable GTX 1060 SSC, again from EVGA. I don't know, I just loved EVGA's graphic cards. They were clean, not overly flashy, and they got the job done. I also went with a 750-watt PSU from Corsair, again for more headroom for upgrades. And I got a few 3TB hard disk drives. Yes, this is before I made the leap to SSD, and all of it went inside an NZXT Phantom 410. I'm surprised I actually remember the parts I got for the PC, because this was back in 2017, almost 10 years ago. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't daunted by building my first PC, because there's a chance I might screw something up. Thankfully, I saw a lot of PC building guides from Tech Syndicate, TechSource, and other YouTubers. Once I got all the parts I needed, I started building my new PC. I started out slow, getting the PSU into the case and getting the motherboard prepped. Went surprisingly without a hitch. From connecting the power cables, to the necessary components, to installing the case fans, to installing the GPU into the motherboard, and of course tidying up the cables to the best of my ability. Then I powered it on, and the feeling of success was so strong. I began installing Windows 10 on the PC, setting everything up, downloading my programs and drivers, and I was ready to game on the new rig. Games looked and performed better. Everything ran smoother than the pre-built, and I was playing games that wouldn't work on the old rig. It was everything I hoped for, and then some. And I've yet to talk about my experience with the Steam community. It was great. At first. I came across some pretty cool people on Steam, but as I mentioned earlier, where there are good people, there are bad. I've come across some toxic people on Steam, and somehow it was even worse than Xbox. Now, I've been dealing with stress at my new job at the time, but the toxicity of Steam didn't help matters. I mentioned it in previous videos, but in my opinion, Steam has the worst community in all of gaming. There are people sending stupid messages, telling me to kill myself for no reason, calling me names for no reason, complaining about certain characters in my Gmod screenshots. Someone even sent me a phishing link, possibly unintentionally, but still. Thankfully none of my info was stolen, but I was forced to change my password to something stronger. But yeah, the Steam community is fucking awful. They do everything they can to fuck with me, outside of sending someone to my house to try to kill me. I even had to report a few people that told me to kill myself. That's how bad the community is. Say what you will about the Xbox community, or maybe even the PlayStation community, but none of them told me to off myself for any reason. You know, there are toxic people, and then there are toxic people. I've blocked more people on Steam than I've ever blocked on Xbox Live, and that's a problem. Like I said, there are good people on Steam, there really are. But when the cons heavily outweigh the pros, it's hard to justify interacting with anyone in the Steam community anymore. Lack of support on my later Gmod screenshots was pretty much the final nail in the coffin. I ended up nuking my friends list around 2019 since I just can't trust them and anyone on Steam anymore. At this point, it's just people being assholes for no reason other than to be assholes. Not a good look for Steam, honestly. Community aside, I still enjoy my time on Steam thanks to all the games. You know, my collection grew thanks to Bundle Stars, now Fanatical. You know, tons of new indie games, as well as a few AAA games for really cheap. I made the switch to Ryzen later on, switching to a Ryzen 5 3600, a well-rounded CPU at the time, and perfect for my needs. I had to swap the motherboard out for an ASRock B450 and got the new CPU in, and my PC's performance had improved a bit, especially on the video editing side. The i5 6600K, really capable CPU, but when it comes to video editing and stuff, it kind of lags behind due to the poor multi-core performance, but that's where Ryzen shines. At least at the time. Yeah, I was still enjoying PC gaming, and then COVID hit. My stress was through the roof at work as a result. Everybody panic shopping, the store being slammed for days on end, shelves being empty. It was hell on earth. And I hope I never had to experience anything like that again. But that wasn't the worst of it. Later on, it got more personal. And my dad had been really under the weather, and we had to take him to the hospital. Thankfully, he didn't have COVID, but that was hardly good news. A CT scan determined that he had cancer. 3 types of cancer: kidney, liver, and prostate cancer, as well as bone cancer on his left hip. So he had to undergo chemotherapy and a removal of one of his kidneys. There were a ton of hardships I had to trudge through in the beginning of the 2020s, but Proteus helped me get through those tough times. I remember playing Fortnite for the first time, and it was a decent game to play from time to time. I'm not the biggest Fortnite fan, but it's just something I play just for the sake of playing. Played a bit of PUBG, my first taste of Battle Royale games. They were exploding at the time. Now they're practically a dime a dozen. Halo the Master Chief Collection came out on Steam around that time, and it made me fall in love with Halo again. I even played Forza Motorsport 7, though I had to buy it from the Microsoft store, but it was so awesome playing Forza on PC. Also around this time, since I had a GTX 1060, I got my first VR headset, a Samsung Odyssey Plus mixed reality headset. I actually forgot that the 1060 was VR capable. I was playing my first VR game, hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. Realistic gun operations, the humor, the various gun modes. This was the game that made me buy a VR headset, and my GTX 1060 was more than up to the task. I also played a few other VR games: Pavlov, Hard Bullet, Blade and Sorcery. I eventually switched to an Oculus Rift S, which was a bit better than a Samsung headset. The controllers weren't bulky, and the VR experience was a bit more fluid. It was also around this time that I got a Raspberry Pi 4 from Best Buy, which I would later use as an emulator. That and my ever-growing Steam library got me through the pandemic. It would be a while before COVID would settle down, but not before it affected my life in a big way. Let's talk about a more serious and life-changing moment before we get back into games. This is going to be difficult to talk about, but I gotta go through it. It was January 2022. There's a little flu bug that was going around at the time. I had nothing but a sore throat, but everyone else in the household got sick. But over the next few days, everyone got better, except my mother. Each day, she wasn't getting better, and she could barely move. It got to the point where we had to call an ambulance to get her to the hospital. It turns out she came down with COVID. To this day, I don't know how she came down with COVID. She rarely left the house since the pandemic. My nephew and I were vaccinated, and we did daily temperature checks, and my dad was surprisingly COVID-free. So, I don't know how my mother got COVID. My only guess is that in the few trips she did take outside the house, she took her mask off. If that's the case, that decision would cost her her life. She was in a cordoned off part of the hospital where they gave her oxygen and tried to give her special treatment. But her condition was not improving. So my father and the rest of the family made the difficult decision to put her on an incubator, which involved putting her in a coma with a high chance that she would not wake up. It had been a tough few days. There were signs of improvement, then there weren't. The COVID infection had progressed to the point where she was almost beyond recovery. Even if she did survive, she would be hooked up to an oxygen machine and a bunch of IVs, something we all know she would never want. So he made the difficult decision to let her pass. She had passed away early February 2022 at the age of 68, with her family by her side. My father took it the hardest, as they had been married for 47 years, and COVID took her away from all of us. It took a while for us to return to normalcy. We had our mother cremated. My nephew and I were taking care of my father, comforting him during this difficult time, along with helping him out with things around the house and running errands, as he was in no condition to do such things on his own, thanks to his cancer. Around this time, let's get into more positive light for a little bit anyway. But around this time, my sister had an extra Nintendo Switch that she gave to us. We fired it up, and I'll admit, I was impressed. The interface was clean, the games were fun and innovative, of course, it's Nintendo, and quite a few games I play on PC are also on Switch and the other consoles. I was impressed because, keep in mind, I was pretty much a PC gamer for all the 8th generation and a good chunk of the 9th. I liked it so much that I eventually got another Switch for my own room. Yeah, funny story, one of my nephews bought a Switch from eBay, if I remember correctly, because his original Switch was supposedly not working properly. But my sister tested it out, and it worked fine. So he was looking to trade in his other Switch, but I chose to buy it off him for around $200. So now, I have my own Switch, with a library of mostly Nintendo exclusives. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, a bunch of other Mario games, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Granted, I don't play the Switch that much, but I still enjoy it. I will admit, part of me missed playing games in front of the TV. Now, I tried playing PC games on the TV with mixed results. I had a Steam Link, which looked really grainy on my 50-inch TV, since the Link only outputted in 1080p. I had a really long HDMI cable that would hook up to my GPU and then the TV, and it worked, but a little input lag since my TV had a lower refresh rate compared to my monitor. So to have a console hooked up to play in front of a TV again was a really refreshing experience, even though the Switch wasn't the most powerful console out there. Before I got the Switch, though, I chose to upgrade my GTX 1060 since GPU prices were going down at the time. It was back in 2022. I got an RTX 2060 from Asus since EVGA left the GPU business. It gave me a chance to experience ray tracing and DLSS features that make games look a lot better. Of course, I had to get Cyberpunk 2077. Now, this is 2 years after its disastrous launch, so a lot of the issues have been fixed, and this is before the Phantom Liberty DLC. During this time, I also chose to invest in the Evercade VS, the dual cartridge classic gaming console that I would later start collecting games for. I also got an Evercade EXP, the updated handheld Evercade, which blew the original handheld out of the water. Later in 2023, I got myself a Steam Deck, which is a great way, at the time at least, to play some PC games on the go without hauling a laptop around. I also got another new VR headset, the HTC Vive Cosmos Elite, which used base stations to track movement. I was also considering getting back into consoles, but due to dealing with ignorant console fanboys, my mind quickly changed, and I instead chose to build a new, more powerful PC. I managed to get a few parts at the time: a Ryzen 7 7700X, 64GB of DDR5 RAM, and an RTX 4070. But of course, even with all this, I was mainly focused on caring for my father, who had been dealing with everything from nausea fits to high blood sugar spikes. Since my mother's passing, caring for my cancer-ridden father wasn't much easier. With his hospital trips, breathing issues, and nausea constipation fits, it was affecting my job, my money, my free time, and even my mental health. He and Mom cared for me for so many years, so it was only fitting that I return the favor. Thankfully, with my nephew and my sister's families, I didn't shoulder all the weight. For a time, he was doing okay, but in December of 2023, his health started deteriorating a lot faster than we had all thought. One of my sisters, who was a nurse, got with his doctor to see about getting our father into hospice care. We ended up getting a hospital bed for him, who, at that point, didn't even have the strength to move. We knew it was only a matter of time. I took time off of work so I could be with my father, who was barely grasping for life. The cancer having taken over his body despite the cancer center's best efforts. A few days later, that time came. He was reunited with my mother. He fought to the very end, but it wasn't enough. He left this world at the age of 70, again with his family by his side. But he had the luxury of passing in the comfort of his own home, a luxury my mother didn't have. But he lived a full life, and we were all finally at peace, knowing that he was finally at peace. The next few weeks were hectic, moving on from my father's passing, getting him cremated, and getting all the legal stuff sorted out. Before he died, he entrusted the legal stuff with one of my sisters. She and her husband did everything they could to make sure that the house was under me and my nephew's name, sorting all of his personal effects, filing his final taxes, and all the other legal stuff. Long story short, everything was sorted out. Now, this part of the video has been really difficult for me to make, but because just thinking about my parents no longer being with us makes me depressed. But I have to keep my chin up, keep living my life how I see fit, and do everything I can to make sure me and my nephew are well off. It's what they would have wanted. Alright, now that part of the video is done and over with, let's try to close this video off in a more positive light. Now that all the stuff with my father has been sorted out, it was time to get back on track with life. Being a homeowner is certainly not easy, but it was still preferable to living in an apartment or a cardboard box. Taking care of the yard, maintaining the appliances and functionality of the house. My father prepared us for this day, and we're doing pretty good, all things considered. With everything squared away, I started getting the rest of my PC parts. The case, the PSU, the storage. Yes, before RAM and storage prices skyrocketed a few years later, I managed to get two 4TB SSDs for less than $300 and a 2TB M.2 for less than $200. Talk about thinking ahead, right? Once all was said and done, Antaeus was born. It blew Proteus out of the water in every way. Graphical power, storage capacity, airflow. Check out my video of the finished build if you haven't already. Even today, Antaeus is still going strong, playing any game I could throw at it, and making video editing go more smoothly. I eventually switched to yet another VR headset since I started having issues with the Vive Cosmos. I got probably the most popular VR headset at the time, a Meta Quest 3. Having already owned a Rift S, setup was seamless, and I was back to blasting SOSIGs and H3 VR. Once I was satisfied with my PC build, I figured it was time to visit an old friend. It was close to my 36th birthday, and I decided to treat myself and give myself an excuse to get back into console gaming. I was tired of playing sides. Consoles and PCs both had their pros and cons, and I will never say one side's better than the other. At the end of the day, it's just video games. If people don't like what you play your games on, that's their problem. Anyway, I swung by Best Buy and decided to get myself an Xbox Series X. Good timing too, as it was on sale for $50 off at the time. I bought that along with Forza Horizon 5. I even did an unboxing video which you can also check out. I was blown away. How many times have I said that throughout the video? This is a huge leap from the last console I played before this and the Switch, the Xbox 360. As I said earlier, I was all PC gamer in the 8th generation and most of the 9th. So to play games in 4K on the TV was a truly refreshing experience. I started getting games that I play on the PC on Xbox, as well as games I missed out on in the 8th generation. I even gave Game Pass a try, long before they hiked the prices up. trying out new indie games and playing online. It was a nice experience, though I don't think it warrants the price it's asking for now, hence why I do all my online gaming on PC. It felt nice getting back into the console ecosystem while still enjoying PC gaming. That expanded later in the year when I decided to get a PS5 Slim for Christmas. Not only did I get it on sale, but I had quite a bit of Amazon store credit, so I got the console for less than $400. Something pretty much unheard of now. Now, I had experience with a DualSense controller on the PC, and it felt good, especially after using the Xbox controller layout for so long. But at the time, I didn't have any PC games that actually took advantage of the haptic feedback and adapted triggers that the DualSense is known for. That changed when I played Returnal on PC, and it was quite the experience, especially with the DualSense Edge. And I thought, you know what? That's actually really cool. So I was sold. I got myself the PS5 Slim with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. After playing through that, I was like, wow, I've been missing out. After the Steam community somewhat soured my view of PC gaming, it was a nice change of pace to play in front of the TV again, and the PS5 really delivered on that immersive experience they pushed with the DualSense and their unique lineup of games. I also got a Switch OLED, which was a huge upgrade from the original Switch, and quickly became my primary Switch, even though I also got a Switch Lite. I ended up getting the games I really liked on all the platforms. Maybe redundant, but I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket, you know. I also wanted to relive at least some of the memories I had in the 360, so I bought a used Xbox 360E, the one that resembles the Xbox One, and I'm slowly rebuilding my 360 library to this day. So yeah, building Antaeus, getting an Xbox Series X and PS5, and even the Switch OLED, all of it helped me get through a really dark time in my life. And while I still mainly play on PC, it's nice to be able to play consoles again, especially Xbox, after nearly a decade of being exclusively a PC gamer. With PC parts and even console prices being the way they are, and with no relief in sight anytime soon, I find myself going back to retro gaming quite a bit. As you've seen from previous videos, I've been collecting games from the previous generations. I've been getting Xbox 360 games here and there. I recently got the Retron 5 and 3 at the time, digging up a few NES and SNES games from my local game stores. Even grabbing some Sega Genesis games, since I never played a Genesis. This was a nice little breath of fresh air even on the retro side. And I even started getting back into buying games for the Evercade. I even bought another Raspberry Pi 4 so I could play more retro games on the PC through a cheap capture card. And the other one I used to play said games on the TV. And I even got a Retron 77 so I could play Atari 2600 games and see what gaming was really like before I was even born. Heck, before my sisters were even born. So in the last decade, I went from a console gamer to a PC gamer to both. I went from retro games to modern games, then going back to retro, while still enjoying the games I have now. I was done playing sides and just wanted to enjoy games on what I want to enjoy them on. And anyone who has a problem with it can sit and spin. I have a PC, I have a Steam Deck, I have a Series X, a PS5, and a Switch OLED. Maybe I'll get a Switch 2 later down the road if Nintendo ever makes more exclusives for it. I got niche consoles like the Evercade, retro clone consoles like the Hyperkin Retrons, and a couple Raspberry Pi 4s as emulation devices. As far as gaming goes, I'm pretty much set. So there you have it, my entire history of gaming, from my younger years to today. In a way, video games have become part of my life. They brought my family together, they brought us good times, they gave us favorites to play and watch, they helped us get through tough times, and they made us forget all the troubles in the world. Yes, we can argue about the rising prices of consoles and PC parts all day, but I'm not going to. I'm happy with what I have. Whether I'm playing Contra or Gradius on the Retron 5, firing up Gears of War again on the 360, or getting annihilated in Battlefield 6 on the PC, I'm enjoying my time as a gamer, and I will hopefully continue to play games until I can play no more. So now you know what games I grew up with, what consoles I played and enjoyed, my PC gaming venture, and my general stance as a gamer. And if you learned anything else about me, it's that I'd rather open a US souvenir shop in North Korea than at anyone from the Steam community ever again. Anyway, if you watched this video to the very end, thank you very much for sticking with me on this journey. Like I said, this video took a long time to make, so a like is really appreciated. And you can subscribe if you like. If you like supporting crappy video creators like me. But you know what? At least my channel isn't full of AI slop, so I have that going for me at least. And if you watched till the very end, I have a very special message for you. Thank you. Thank you very much for helping me get this far. Your support, no matter how big or small, has got me to this point. Doing this YouTube thing for a decade now. I can't believe it's been that long since I started this channel. Starting off with indie box unboxings and Mugen videos, to Doom videos and random Steam games, to Dwarf Fortress and retro gaming videos. You've helped me make this a hobby that I enjoy. I may not have like 50 million subscribers or high quality videos, and I probably never will. But I do this for fun. I do it because I enjoy it. It gets me through tough times, and it lets me show the world who I am. And without your support, who knows where I'd be right now. So I'll say it again. Thank you very much for your continued support. I hope you can continue supporting smaller YouTubers like me, and stay away from the scammers, brain-rotten AI slop. This is Unforgiving Caleb, signing out. Thank you again for sticking with me on this journey. And as always, y'all have a good day. Here's to another 10 years on YouTube.